2 pilots confirmed dead tonight, 41 people transported to the hospital, 32 of them released, 9 still being treated for serious injuries. And LaGuardia Airport, one of the 3 busiest airports serving New York City, closed until at least 2 in the afternoon, with the investigation timeline still open-ended. Here is what we know right now. Just before midnight on Sunday, an Air Canada Express flight operating under the Jazz Aviation banner was on final approach into LaGuardia, inbound from Montreal, 72 passengers, 4 crew members, runway 4. The conditions at the time: light rain, fog, mist, reduced visibility as that aircraft came down through the approach path. A Port Authority fire truck was on the same runway. The truck had been cleared by air traffic control to cross. It was responding to a separate and unrelated incident on the airfield. A United Airlines aircraft had reported an unusual odor, and the fire vehicle was in motion toward that call. Somewhere in the sequence of events that followed, the Air Canada regional jet and the fire truck occupied the same ground on the same runway at the same moment. The nose of the aircraft was torn off. The Port Authority fire truck was overturned and badly damaged. The 2 pilots seated in the forward cockpit section of that jet are dead. Port Authority of New York and New Jersey confirmed the collision occurred at approximately 11:40 p.m. Then SBS has activated and deployed a GO team. LaGuardia is closed, and the families of everyone who was on that aircraft are waiting for answers that can only come through a careful, methodical investigation. A passenger who was aboard that flight described the experience. "The approach felt normal," he said. "The plane came in fast, the way a regular landing feels. It came down hard, stopped very quickly. And then, about 2 seconds later, there was a full, violent impact. Everyone was thrown. The aircraft began moving left and right. There was chaos. No one felt like anyone was in control. That account matters for a specific reason. What he is describing is a 2-event sequence. The initial touchdown was survivable. It was rough, but it was a landing. The second event, the collision with the fire truck, is what produced the catastrophic damage visible in the images taken. On the tarmac, the nose of that aircraft, the cockpit section, the area where both pilots were seated, destroyed on impact." Air traffic control recordings that have begun to surface add a layer to the timeline that investigators will focus on closely. The fire truck, according to these reports, had received clearance from ground control to cross runway 4. That clearance was issued. The truck entered the runway, and then, in what appears to have been the final seconds before the collision, an air traffic controller transmitted repeated commands to the vehicle to stop, stop, stop. The vehicle did not stop in time. Whether that represents a communications failure, a transmission that was sent but simply not received clearly in the cab of a vehicle running emergency sirens, or a recognition and reaction gap that no driver could have closed in the seconds available, or a fundamental coordination breakdown between 2 controllers managing overlapping ground traffic on a visibility-reduced airfield, is precisely what the SBS GO team is now on the ground at LaGuardia to determine through evidence, not assumption, what it cannot be at this stage, and what responsible investigators will not allow it to become prematurely is a conclusion. The evidence has to be collected, preserved, and analyzed first. That process takes months, not hours. What investigators will have to work with is a dense, multi-layered, and highly detailed evidentiary record. ADS-B flight tracking data will provide the aircraft's precise speed, altitude, and position through every second of the approach and landing roll. Ground surveillance radar may have captured the fire truck's movement across the airfield surface in real time. Airport security camera systems and potentially personal recording devices from passengers still inside the terminal area could provide visual documentation of the ground-level timeline from multiple independent angles. The cockpit voice recorder will carry the complete audio environment inside the flight deck, every crew communication, every system alert tone, every ambient sound across the final minutes and seconds before the point of impact. Air traffic control audio transcripts will reconstruct every exchange between the tower, ground control, the aircraft crew, and the fire truck crew. When that body of evidence is assembled and cross-referenced, then SBS will be able to build a precise, frame-by-frame timeline of what each vehicle was doing, what was transmitted and received, and at what exact point the chain of coordination failed. One aviation analyst raised a significant and important point about the physics of the collision, in direct response to early reports suggesting the aircraft was moving at only 20–30 miles per hour at the moment of impact. The visible damage at the crash site, he argued, is not consistent with what you would expect from 2 vehicles meeting at that combined speed. Under normal circumstances, consider the structural realities. An aircraft fuselage, a regional jet in particular, is constructed from aluminum alloy, optimized for weight, not for absorbing the kinetic energy of a head-on collision with a ground vehicle. A fully equipped airport fire and rescue truck is a heavy, steel-framed emergency response structure that can weigh in excess of 50,000 pounds. When those two objects meet with crossing or opposing velocity vectors, the truck moving laterally at speed across the path of the aircraft continuing its ground roll forward after touchdown, the energy transferred to the aluminum cockpit and nose section is not a simple product of either vehicle's individual speed. It is determined by their combined closing velocity at the point of contact. If the fire truck was moving at 50 miles per hour and the aircraft was traveling at 30, and those velocity vectors were pointed at each other, the effective impact energy at the nose of that jet approaches the equivalent of an 80-mile-per-hour collision, concentrated entirely on the forward section of the fuselage. The nose of that Air Canada aircraft was not dented or crumpled. It was sheared away entirely. That outcome is entirely consistent with the physics of combined closing velocity and the structural disparity between an aluminum aircraft nose and a steel emergency vehicle. This is not the first time a runway incursion has produced a fatal outcome at an American airport. It is, in fact, a category of accident that the SBS and the FAA have studied, issued recommendations on, and attempted to engineer out of the system for decades. The 1991 collision at Los Angeles International between a U.S. Air Boeing 737 and a SkyWest commuter aircraft that had been cleared onto an active runway killed 34 people. The lessons from that accident produced changes to runway incursion protocols and surface movement procedures at airports across the country. And yet here we are, more than 3 decades later, at a major metropolitan airport in the middle of the night, with a fire truck on an active runway and an aircraft on final approach, and 2 pilots dead. The question that investigators, aviation safety regulators, airport operations officials, and Congress will have to engage with seriously in the months ahead is not simply what went wrong in this specific sequence of events on this specific night. The deeper question is a structural one. How do multiple layers of coordination, tower control, ground control, vehicle operator training, runway incursion alerting systems, surface detection technology all exist simultaneously at a major American airport and still produce this outcome? Air traffic control clearances are issued with the understanding that the surface is clear and will remain clear for the duration of the authorized movement. When a second and competing demand entered the system that night, the United Airlines aircraft reporting an odor, triggering an emergency response, the coordination chain was asked to manage 2 active situations simultaneously on a fog-reduced airfield in the middle of the night. Whether the system failed at the controller level, the vehicle operator level, the communication technology level, or some combination of all 3 is what the evidence will eventually show. What is visible right now in the photographs taken on the tarmac at LaGuardia in the early hours of Monday morning is the cost of that failure. An Air Canada regional jet with its nose section gone, a fire truck overturned on a runway, 41 people taken to hospitals, and 2 empty seats in a cockpit where 2 pilots who flew a routine overnight flight from Montreal to New York did not survive their landing. LaGuardia is closed. Then SBS is on the ground, and the full accounting of what happened on runway 4 just before midnight on Sunday night has only just begun.